Hi, this is Boiler Dan 1 and welcome to my channel if you're a first-time viewer. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. It's been a while since I've posted anything in the area of model shipbuilding. In April of 2021, I took on one of my first major ship builds, and that was building the golden edition of the Black Pearl. Since that time, I have learned better techniques. I've just gotten a little bit better at model shipbuilding. Still not a professional by any means, but there were some things I did in that first video that I wish I could have done over and done better. So here in April of 2026, I'm starting completely over and I'm going to build another Black Pearl Golden Edition. I'll feature some of the things I wish I would have done earlier, and it'll be a little faster. I won't go into quite as much detail because you can still watch the original that I made back in 2021. But let me show you some better techniques. I hope you will join me in this adventure of building the Black Pearl Golden Edition 2026. Before we actually get started, let's talk about the workspace that you'll need when you're talking about a major ship build. This is my shop. It's out in my garage. Anytime I feature a tool, I will put a link. If you go, you can see products. I think it's the lower left part of the screen. You can click on it, and I'll put links to where you could purchase one of these if you'd like. I do get a small commission back if you do purchase as a result of my videos, so I appreciate that. I have a lot of things in a very small space, a lot of storage. You can see all these drawers. Some are tools, some are designated to my hobby. This is my main work surface. Then I have a large drawer here that is designated just for the parts that will build a ship. And so it's kind of nice to have that, and then I can tuck it away. I know where all the parts are. These are all having to do with prior ship builds. I save some of the parts and pieces. You'll need a ton of brushes and cutting tools and all kinds of little things that come in handy. This is an experiment I'm working on, trying to age some copper. I've been making some of my own wood, and not making the wood, but I've been cutting some of my own wood. There's some projects like this one here that is not laser cut. It had to be cut by hand, so I replaced some of the wooden parts on this paddle wheel steamer. Underneath it is a laser cutter, and that also will come into play in this construction project. A portable table saw, sanding belt, and a drill press. One of the handiest things also is this workstation made by Win. It has some clamping mechanisms and it comes in handy, and I also use that in building the ship. You are going to need to be able to cut out all these wood pieces. They have little tabs, and this wood's fairly thick, and you can try and get in there with a knife and cut those tabs off. But when you get to some of the real thin wood and delicate things, if you're not careful, they'll break. This is where I've been using this Dremel moto saw. It's like a scroll saw, but it's smaller, and it clamps on to the table for my drill press. I use this to just go through. You can see where I've cut, and I just follow that pre-laser cut line and cut those tabs off. Here's an example of my using this moto saw to cut the parts out. I've got a shop vac tube that will fit underneath, and the trick to it is you push this down onto your wood piece, and then to get rid of the slack, just kind of lift up slightly and push down a little more, and that'll make it nice and snug. To release this shoe, you push down on this blue tab, and then it will raise up. You probably can't tell, but when I get that blade in there, I'm kind of pushing along this outside edge here. so I don't cut anything off of that piece. Show you better if I turn it on. So I'm actually cutting on that edge. You can see where it was cut off. And then I leave everything on here and I'll just file that little nub off. A little more information on this tool. It comes with several different size blades. The on-off switch is under here. It's this little dial, or this little push button, and then it's multiple speeds. So that's my little preview on the Dremel Moto saw. If you're going to do electrical work, I've drilled holes on both sides. I did that prior to installing these, and I do not glue these in place yet. I found that once I get the deck on, it will hold them straight just like they need to be, and then I'll turn it over or work from the side and put some adhesive in there so I don't have to worry about these getting crooked. They also need to be flush with the top of this center bracing. So I've got those all flush because the deck is going to rest on that. And then when you, whatever layer you go to, those need to be flush. Obviously not this piece, that's the front wall, and it'll have the deck go up to it. So I have all that done and in place. Make sure you sand off any nubs. You might be able to see there was a nub right there, because those little nubs can cause you all kinds of little issues as far as proper fitting. In my first model, I stained everything before I started. I'm going to do a few things different. I've stained this part because I was, putting together with the windows and things. So I went ahead and stained what's going to show. And the rest I'm going to leave for now, unless I know it needs stained, because this gets double planked. The hull will have 2 layers of planking. The first one is a thicker wood. Once I have that installed, I'm going to paint it black. Then I will come back with a very thin walnut that will go on there, and I will treat the walnut before I put it on, before I glue it. If you're using stain and you have any glue on any of the wood, then the stain will not adhere. It will not work. You'll have a white spot or whatever color the wood is. So if you choose to stain, be sure and do that before you put any glue. First thing I want to cover on what I've done a better job of is where it shows where you need to taper something. And this is very important at the front of the ship. When you start taking your planking around, you need to cut off those edges. And especially here at the front of the ship, shows these red lines, and there's actually lines on these pieces where you need to taper that. You can see I've tapered this, and I've not finished, because when you get here, you're going to go from this point all the way, a real hard curve right there. So I'm going to taper this edge off, and let me show you how I do that. There's a special mention in the instructions for this part number 4 that you need to make sure that it is perpendicular to the keel here, this center frame. And they said that it needs to be filed, that they were aware of it. And you can see right in here, there's a gap. So this needs to be pushed back. So I'll need to take a file and work on this area here so that this will actually be perpendicular. So I will work on that off camera. It didn't take much. I used just this little tiny file. Just did a little bit of sanding or filing, and now that fits up there flush and what I think is perpendicular. I should have shown this completely in the proper assembly, because 2B should have been in there. It's in there now. and you can see this will sit perpendicular. I had not paid attention when I put in my windows that this 2B part would be where some of my windows are. So what I will do is make sure I paint that black and you will not see it. The other thing I could do is, and I may go ahead and cut a notch. Let me get on this side. So I can cut a notch out of the larger window if I want to. I did end up cutting those channels out of this 2B piece so that when you look in, you won't see that flooring, and you'll see down into the ship where I will put some lighting. Those are all in place, dry fitted, not cemented in yet. This is the rear of the ship, part 13, 14, and 14 for some reason the numbers are upside down. And the only one that's a little tricky if you're new to ship modeling is 15 and 16. So 15 will fit in 17. 17 is the only one that you put the number facing backwards. That's going to get planked over. You can put those together. I haven't glued anything. That's just my preference. For clarification, when you're talking about parts 14, here's 14, I'm taking it off. 15 and 16, 16 is this one. Part 2A needs to go right along that line, but if you notice the line here, and there's a small one up there, that indicates where that will go. Helps hold 16 exactly in the position it needs to go in. And there are 2A's for both sides, but on the opposite side back here, there are no lines. I have the 2A piece put on both sides, and I have part number 16, which is this rib here. And once that glue sets up, then I will go ahead and put 15 and 17 on the back of the ship, right up in this area. Here's another tricky part of 15, 16, 17. Put 17 into those two pieces first. And I did have to sand that out a little bit. And then it's taking a bit of pressure to get this to swing into where it goes. So I'll put some adhesive on it, and then I'm going to rubber band it. In addition to the rubber bands being used to pull this 17 into the ship, I also put some clamps here to pull it in even more snug right in that edge there. And I did that on both sides. I'm starting to do some of the gluing. This piece that needed to be perpendicular, I put some adhesive in. I'm using wood glue for the most part, and then these clamps just to hold them good and tight. If you're a beginner, here is a helpful hint on how to get deck number 20 on, and it involves just taking out number 6 and position that. Then slide 6 into place, and at the same time, you can start positioning all these ribs into place and work your way towards the back of the ship. If for some reason yours is too snug, you can file these openings a little bit. Mine's tight, but it will fit. This deck is going to have an arch to it, so that will make it even get tighter as we get down to this far end. Now this is where I'm going to have to kind of force it to bow to get this part in here, and it gets real snug. And I may end up having to file some of mine. I don't know yet. No, that's it. It has that natural arch that it needs to have, and it is in place. The instructions mention that some people cut these off, and it says that they ask you not to do that. I do think eventually you do, because if you look further in the manual, these are not present and the planking cover these openings. So I will research that a little more and let you know what I decide. I've still not put any adhesive on any of this. This is all real snug. These are not moving. So after all this dries, I'll turn the boat upside down and I'll just tack some wood glue in underneath where it doesn't show. As you're working on putting this upper deck in place, you need to put the doors and the windows on this lower entrance to the captain's quarters. The doors and actually the wall framing are all pre-made and they're made out of black walnut. I just struggle with painting and sometimes even putting stain on black walnut. What I use is Minwax tung oil finish, and it absorbs in to bare wood, gives it a little additional strength, and brings out the natural beauty of the wood. And it works really well on walnut. This is just one coat. It suggests two. If you really work at it hard, after you get the second one on, you can polish it and bring a really nice sheen to it. Now this is still a little bit damp. You can see there's little shiny marks, but those will go away unless you keep putting more on and buff it. So it just depends on what part of the ship you're working on. I'm going to conclude part one because I realized as I'm starting to get into the build, there's some things that you really need to do and decide on. And part of that is if you're going to put lights on the ship separate from what came with it. I always do my own separate ones, and that's going to require that I do some black painting at the lower decks and run some wiring. So I'm just going to give you a sneak peek of that. And then in part two, I'll finish up what I had started and a little more detail on that wiring. Although I'm not an expert, so you're going to have to do some research on that for yourself if you choose to light up your ship. I had briefly mentioned that I put these windows on the front of the ship. That's just for my own desire. My laser cutting machine made the windows. I really like them. So I put those in, and then the idea was to put some lighting behind it. So I have flickering LEDs. You can see one on each side here. That will show through to all four windows. But then these two larger ones, they go down deeper. And remember, I cut this out. So down lower, I put in one more on each side. I've done the same thing back in this area. When I get this put in place, I will have some lights back in this small area. And then the captain's quarters, which will go around here with lots of windows, I will do the same thing and put in flickering LED lights.